All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Neil Callanan. Neil, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me, man.
You bet. I've been looking forward to this. And I want to start off by giving a shout out to Brianna and the whole team over there at Interview Valet, because that's how you and I got connected. And I'll tell you, it's interesting, Neil, because I've known Brianna for a while. I mean, a couple of years now. And she has referred a number of amazing guests to me for this podcast and stuff. And so now, whenever I get an email from her, I never know exactly what's going to be in it, but it kind of feels like Christmas time because I'm like, I know it's going to be good.
Well,
So,
fingers crossed. I won't sell your record. Disappointing.
well, after our last conversation, like I said, I've been really looking forward to this, and what a great way to connect, which is, through somebody that we've already got a great relationship with and
Yeah.
stuff. And so what we'll do is, just to start, I'll ask you a really simple question to start. Neil, what do you do and who do you serve?
I run a small digital agency. We're called Loose Grip,
Okay.
and we focus primarily on data and analytics and performance marketing. And of late, we've been focusing our energy on our framework, which is the GRASP framework, which is primarily focused on helping activism and values forward brands measure the impact of their work, not just on the bottom line, but on the planet and purpose and the people.
Yeah. So how did you even get in how long have you been doing this to start with the initial business? How long have
Sure.
how
Well, Loose Grip's almost 17 years old.
uh-huh.
We started in 2008,
Okay.
and yeah, we, kind of worked our way into this, honestly. Analytics and data measurement have always been kind of a big part of what we do at Loose Grip, but more so on the execution side. I'm, running Google Analytics and campaigns for folks and tracking the performance of our own campaigns.
Mhm.
And I'd say about, I don't know, 5 years ago, a little bit more, we just kind of looked into working with some brands who um, kind of had a dual purpose, right? One is to sell some stuff, and two is to have a positive impact out in the world. And in doing so, we realized that our framework for how we think about measurement and objectives and KPIs really actually worked best for groups like that, primarily because they really care about the content that they're creating more than just necessarily a vessel for sales, but they want to often want to engage their audience and educate and inform and activate in ways that if you're just selling a commoditized product or a service, there's not necessarily as much of an incentive to
Sure.
place all your energy there. So yeah, full transparency, we kind of looked into it, and then since then, more and more companies have been coming to us who have kind of a dual mandate, and they're saying we need help measuring everything we're doing, both on the micro level to figure out how to do it better, but also kind of on the macro level to justify doing it in the first place. So,
Okay.
um,
Okay. So how did you first get into this 17 years ago, Neil?
well, I'd love to have a great hero's journey of striking out on my own and say that I always wanted to. But the reality was, I worked for an agency that shut down, kind of peak financial recession. I was a pretty young guy. And the interesting part was I had sort of seen the writing on the walls, and I wanted out. I wanted out of that company, and I had been interviewing aggressively for like 6 months with very
Okay.
little luck. It was just not a time to get hired. Late 2008, early 2009,
Yeah.
and so when I came in on Wednesday and they said everybody's last day is Friday, and you can take your laptop and your chair with you as your severance, which I did.
Wow.
It was a very very comfortable chair, and I realized pretty quick that it was going to be easier to start a business than get a job. I had 4 or 5 clients at the agency I was their main point of contact, and I really just needed to convince one that going with me was the path of least resistance, and I was able to do that. And here we are, almost
Wow.
20 years later.
Wow. I'll tell you what, that was a quick pivot though. I mean, for one, I mean, get notice on Wednesday and take your chair and laptop and you're out of here by Friday. And
Yeah,
so
it was.
and
I think I was the least surprised of the folks. It was that point in time, and I can empathize actually with those agency owners now as husband and wife. It was just a really hard time to keep the lights on and keep everybody getting paid. And we did a lot of work with venture-backed firms, and the funding had just come to a halt. And they
Yeah.
just they didn't seem like they had the fight left in them, and they didn't. And
Yeah.
that was, and the older I get, the more I respect their decision to
Hmm.
shut the
Hmm.
doors.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember 2008, 2009. I mean, there a lot of stuff was happening back then for sure,
Yeah.
and crazy stuff. Yeah. Wow. So, um, so you've been doing this for 17, 18 years now. What is it? What inspires you most about the work you do and the impact that you guys get to make, Neil?
I would say honestly, I really like to work with really smart people. And that sounds really kind of obvious or maybe a little bit, um, facetious, but our team is really good and the clients that we work with are really good. And that's not to say anybody's ever been bad over the years, but just when you start working, especially on some of these really activism and values forward brands, like people really care, right? Like
Yes.
they
Yeah.
really care. And it's a hard job to get. A lot of these guys, if you're the head of marketing for one of these really cool, well-loved brands, it's a job that is competitive to get. And so there's a lot of um, just a lot of high performers and high performers, but high performers that seem to have a ability to empathize and care about the planet and care about people. And the more and more that I do this work, you realize that the process is the journey is kind of the end, right? And so if you're not enjoying the journey, you're not going to enjoy the work, right? Otherwise, it's
That's right.
just money.
Yeah.
And over time, I feel like every time we get to add a new really sharp person to our team or work with a new client or they bring on somebody new who's really exciting, I just get jazzed by that. I think kind of smarts are contagious, and
Mhm.
so I like to be around people spreading that around.
Yeah. Man, I feel you 100%. It is. It is cool to hang out with and just even serve just people who are people who inspire us. And man, I totally feel you 100%, man.
Yeah.
So what, and we don't have to name names here or anything, but what's an example of a result that you guys have helped a client get that you're just incredibly proud of?
Yeah. One I really love is, when we do implement our framework, the GRASS framework, we're typically helping them take their objectives and then, assign KPIs to their objectives. So taking their objectives sounds obvious, but honestly, a lot of companies, as I'm sure you see, they don't have them clearly defined. Like, what is our goal here? Why are we spending money on marketing? Why are we creating content? What is our website supposed to do? What are our public appearances? What are our events supposed to do? Like the really obvious, what's the point of that? Well, why are we doing that thing is a question I think folks don't get asked a lot. So there's a lot of just doing that over time, and do it because the last guy did it or we did it last year. So that's why we do it again this year.
Mhm.
And for this specific client that I'm thinking of, we were able to help them. They are very forward in their activism, meaning if an issue comes out, they are quick to talk about it. They're use their brand to really engage on all types of values and issues and activism on the planet, on people, on voting rights, on gay rights, on any kind of different issues. It's kind of core to who they are, and so it's really cool to work with a company like that. But I think the thing that was really exciting for us is there's always a question of, well, um, how do we measure activism? Why are we doing it? How do we measure it? What what's the point? And today, a lot of brands are a lot more handcuffed by just the nature of what it's like right now. ESG is getting really deprioritized, DEI, all kinds of sort of do-goodery. People are kind of going back to like, well, why should brands have a voice? Why should brands talk about this? Why should brands be doing any of this? Um, and so we were basically tasked with looking to see how to better measure that impact. And one of the things that we tried to do was say, these things don't live in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is you want to sell some stuff and generate a profit and a revenue, and you want to sell more stuff. And you also want to have a purpose, and we want to measure that, and we want to see what the impact of that is. But for this particular client, what was really exciting is a couple of guys on our team built out something they call the halo effect. And the idea is not only to look at, well, what's the value of us posting about voting rights or about climate change, but to then do a really comprehensive study of thousands of posts over years, over 10 countries, to look at when we post about climate change, when we talk about it, what's the impact on the next post when we're trying to sell our thing, when we're pushing our product a little bit more aggressively, when we're trying to put a recipe in front of folks, when we're trying to send people to a place where they can get our product delivered to them right now. And one of the things that we saw that was really cool was it doesn't live in a vacuum, right? We can start to compare in a real scientific manner, how does that activism bent, how does that values bent impact the next 5 posts that have nothing to do with it, right? Algorithmically, in terms of just how the brand evangelists feel about it. And it really provided the company with some great internal ammunition to be able to say to the board and to the shareholders, no, we need to keep talking. We need to keep having a voice. We need to keep being clear in our values, because look, it actually helps us sell stuff. It's not just for the purpose of that. That's really good, but also it's impacting our bottom line positively. And so, we were so excited about being able to measure that. And now we look at it every report that we do. We take a quick look. Hey, let's look at our halo effect impacts from the 3 most engaged with values posts. How did that impact the flavors or the recipe launch or the piece of content that came out following it? Did we sell more stuff the next day? And that's really exciting, because then when these folks go into the meetings where somebody's saying, why should we talk about this? This is just scary. We don't want the president posting about us or whatever, right? And you could say, well, we should do it because here's the impact we're having, and here's the impact of that purpose on our bottom line, and we actually sell more stuff. So it's been a really cool journey to kind of go with them to help them feel even more um, confident that the decisions to have voices make sense for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's interesting. You know, this good friend of mine, I met him 13 years ago. And shortly after I met him, his name's Jesse. Jesse Elder is his name. And shortly after I met him, probably, I don't know, within 6 months, we were spending time down at his place in Texas. And he makes this comment to me. He's like, Kev, he's like, I got nothing to prove and nothing to hide. And as soon as he said that, I'm just like, wow, what a cool place that must be to come from,
Yeah,
And I'm like, man, I want to come from that place. And of course today, 13 years later, I totally do come from that place. And
yeah,
and I've gone through a lot of personal growth just to get there.
yeah,
And because we all, and especially like, man, I've spent, I've invested over 7 figures being in mastermind groups and stuff for entrepreneurs over the years. And so many of these groups, especially if the focus is around best practices, So the if that's the case, well, unintentionally or not, then people should tend to show up wanting or feeling like they need to talk about where they're winning, where they're crushing it and stuff. And so that becomes the vein of all the conversations. And also, there's, we might be really great at this thing over here, but at any given time, we've also got very real challenges, very real problems we're dealing with. And we've got to be able to just be able to be open and show up and be able to talk about that stuff too and get insight and feedback and uh but I'll tell you, just being in this place where, like Jesse said, I got nothing to prove and nothing to hide. And just show up and be me and just know fully that the right people are going to be attracted to that and the right people won't be attracted to that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
As you were talking about it, what I was thinking is one of the questions I get asked a lot is sort of, how do you know if a brand is doing sort of data and analytics and measurement well, whether it's a values brand or not, any brand. And I think a really easy question is just to ask what didn't work last year. And you get a really clear picture on if they're willing to have a transparent, candid view on their own performance, their team's performance, their agency's performance, whoever. And if they are, the chances are that they're going to be much more successful, right? Like the person who's self-conscious about the investments that they've made, or they're second guessing what their team's performance, they're going to show you all the numbers that say everything is amazing. Look how many commas are in this number, right? And the brands who are actually the highest performers, they're quick to say, yeah, we tried this thing, it didn't work so well.
Mhm.
And what we learned from it was this, right?
Yeah.
We tried this new channel, this new format, this new style, this new creative, this new messenger, this new influencer. It didn't work so well. And you'll hear a lot more of that from the higher performers than you do from the less high performers, because they understand that if you only look for winners, you can only look to copy what's working. But if you spend some time kind of being self-critical of what didn't hit the way you hoped it had, you can really learn just as much, if not more, from that
Yeah.
about how to do it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then we all know that, most of what anybody tries, it's not going to work. The majority of it. But yet, you find these things, I don't know how often, one or two out of 10, 3 out of 10, you find, oh my gosh, that really worked. And let's do more of that,
Yeah, we use this framework, and I my team, the baseball analogies and metaphors really lose or lost on basically everyone else in the world. So the batting percentage metaphor is one I've been trying to tone down a little bit, but the I really do think it's a matter of you know you're not aiming to hit 1,000. You can't do it. It won't work. And if you do, you're measuring 1,000, right? And so when we put things into practice, a lot of times on the digital side, on the loose grip side, we're sort of saying, listen, we're going to do some blocking, tackling, try to hit some singles. We're just going to try to get on base some. And then in the middle, we'll be trying some new things, right? Maybe half as often. So maybe 7 times out of 10, we're just going to be doing what we know is going to get us on first base. And then in the middle, two, maybe we're going to try some new techniques. We're going to try a new swing. We're going to try a thing to just see if we can improve a little bit, new grip, whatever it might be. And then one out of every times we're going to try to swing for the fences, right? So that we can sort of have this balance of like, if we just go swinging for the fences, yeah, we might hit a lot of home runs. We're going to strike out a ton, and we're not going to be able to learn a lot from that, because you're only learning if you succeed, one out of every 10 times, it's a winner, right? And I
Yeah.
think that analogy holds true a lot in all things marketing, really. Figure out what you know is working, do more of that,
Yep.
make small tweaks to that, try some new stuff with a few other things. And then every once in a while, yeah, make a big swing, go for it. But, you know, there's some kind of, your shoulders can only handle so many big swings, you're
Yeah.
going to end
Yeah.
up not being able to make it happen.
You bet. Yeah. Well, this is really great. And so now that we've got some context set here, I want to switch gears just a little bit, and
Sure.
and I want to ask you about relationships. So I'll start by asking, Neil, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, I have some, when I knew you were going to ask this question, my initial instinct was to kind of think about all the big wigs I've met who have given me sage guidance and, changed the trajectory through their wisdom. And then I realized, there's a guy who has really changed the trajectory of my life professionally. And it's not a guy who would fit that bill at all. When I was at the agency that I spoke about, our head of development or head of technology was a good buddy I just became friends with. And he was somebody that I just really enjoyed working with. We couldn't be more different. We have the total opposite skill sets. Um, he's not an expert communicator, but man, he's so good at getting things done and thinking critically and pushing back. And um, so this guy who was two cubicles down, Marty, um, I was lucky enough that when the agency shut down, I was able to convince him to come work with me. And 17 years later, Marty's still on the team. He still crushes all the things all the time. And he and I both, I think our lives would look pretty different without being able to work together for the last nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
When you get into a relationship like that, there is projects from which my financial outcome is drastically different because of the skills he was able to bring to the table. And I think he gets to work with some cool clients because of the skills I bring to the table. And we just have a really um, symbiotic relationship. And when I started, it was me and him. And since then, we're 10-ish people now. And Marty's still right there in the thick of all the things keeping us moving forward. And I attribute a lot of our success to him specifically. But when I think about it, the impact on me, he's a guy I've talked to almost every weekday for the last 20 years. That's a
Wow.
relationship
Wow.
that'll kind of change your life.
That's really something. That's really something. So what's an example? I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. What's an example of a situation where you, Neil, got to make this really substantial impact? Maybe even it kind of surprised you a little bit in the moment, and yet that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with Marty. What's an example of something like that where you were empowered because of Marty?
Well, the example that I used earlier about the halo effect and measuring, subsequent posts after a real
Mhm,
value-driven post.
mhm.
The nice thing about our relationship is I can say to Marty, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could measure X? Wouldn't it be cool? And I can just brainstorm with him and he'll say, yeah, it'd be cool. And then he takes his engineering chops and he figures out how to do it. I can't pull data from APIs and, pivot tables and all kinds of, especially now we use AI for all kinds of stuff. He's got agents that I can talk to answer my questions. And that level of just technical ability to understand a problem, but then go attack it, I don't have it. It's not a skill set of mine. I can't tell you how to structure your data. I can't tell you how to clean your data. I can't tell you how to normalize things. I can't even speak the language of statisticians and data scientists. It just is not who I am. But I think that's one of those examples of me thinking about the problem and the context and what would be really helpful to have here, empathizing with our clients and saying like, man, what are they really asking? Well, what they're really asking is proof that should keep doing the things that they're doing and it's worth
Yeah,
being loud about it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I can connect really good with the client and understanding what they're really asking for and peeling back the onion a little bit, but I can't make it reality without people like Marty.
yeah,
And so I think in this case, it's an example where his skills of bringing things to market are just hands down anybody I've ever worked with. I can come up with a product idea and he just built it. I wouldn't even know where to start. I wouldn't know where to go.
yeah,
Um, and even 10 years ago, when things were a whole lot different than they are now, um, his ability to think like an engineer, because he is an engineer, is what saves our ass and
yeah,
gets things to market, right? He'll say,
yeah,
you don't really want to do it like that because this, and this. I'll go down rabbit holes. I can get really excited and go off and racing in the wrong direction. And he's very good at helping me understand the reality of making things real.
yeah, yeah. And then that really is powerful, to like what you were saying, being able to put content out there that's, not necessarily talking about business per se or what the products or the services that we offer, but being able to put that out there, what's really on our heart when it comes to this,
Yeah.
and how does that impact sales and revenue and just down the line from there, and you're right, if because I mean everybody talks about being your real self. The term authentic has been, overused, I think, even. But, I mean, people do want to be authentic. Some people do want to be authentic, but they might be concerned, like, well, if I just say that, then how is that going to, I want to be careful what I say, and to be able to like really track this and look at it and go like, oh, me just being my real self and just talking about something that I really am passionate about and that really do believe in and stuff, that does impact business in a positive way and stuff. That is really cool to be able to see. And then what powerful confirmation that is, like, oh, it's okay for me to do that and I should do that more. you know
Yeah, and I think when we talk to a lot of brands, um, and it's pretty, I can very quickly at this point um, get a feel on how authentically they are advocating for whatever cause it may be. And we all see it when it's bad, and maybe everyone isn't as critical as I am. But every time I see a Martin Luther King Day post or a Mother's Day post or Veterans Day post from a brand who that's the only time they're going to talk about that issue all year, and they can't tell you how they're backing up any of their support. It's like literally a picture of an American flag on the 4th of July, but they're not talking about these issues they say they're committed to. Man, my virtue signaling radar is very, very sensitive. And, the best brands can answer the question, how? So you support the troops. How? So you are committed to um, fixing the gender pay gap. How? Right? And the brands who really are committed to any given thing, they'll have an answer. It might not be, and their answer probably won't be, it's exactly this, but they'll say, we impact it by doing X and Y. That's our goal. And I think the more that brands can kind of have a dual purpose mission statement, right? We want to sell widgets and positively impact. I think, Patagonia's line is positively impact our home planet. But then they follow that up with the 10 things that they are doing currently that are measurable, that are tangible, that they're working towards. And they're living it out, right? When they say they want to positively impact the planet, they'll tell you how they're doing it.
Yeah.
They won't just say the words, and they'll be quick to follow it up with data and information and impact. And you start to get a pretty good sense for that when you talk to brands a lot,
Yeah.
how committed they are to any one of these causes that they're advocating for.
Yeah. And then, you look at their people, their customers who buy from them, and how much more do they buy because they're in alignment with their, what that company is doing to save the planet and stuff and to make the
Yeah.
planet a better place, you know. And I would imagine that when there's that alignment of interests and values, that customers buy more, because they
Yeah,
just
and
want to support that.
I would say that for most brands that are really good at being activists of some kind, at being values forward, um, at having a purpose beyond profits, they probably know it inherently. Yep, when we do this, it's part of the reason people love our brand. Our goal is to help improve that with data. And that's, I would say, where a lot of these brands and organizations, they're just feeling like, man, we know people like us more when we talk about this value or climate change or a commitment to any number of causes. We know that our best customers, we generate more goodwill with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they probably don't have a data point to actually tell you exactly how much and how.
Yeah.
And we're in the belief that in today's world we can figure out what that data point should be. I think it's doable for any brand to be able to come in and say, how are we going to measure purpose and our activism and its impact on our bottom line and what that means to our customers.
Yeah. 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 You've got my mind thinking. In fact, that's why I'm just sitting here taking down a couple notes. so, um, well, so I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. And I bet there's some people that have been listening to this going, man, Kev, well, for one, I just really like Neil. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. But man, what you guys are talking about, this is making me think too.
Yeah.
And man, I'm thinking like maybe it would be really worthwhile to have a conversation with Neil or somebody on his team or what have you. So any websites, any resources we can share with folks and include that with the podcast here.
Sure. Well, I'll end with the URL, but I like to try to give a little bit more value before I make
Okay.
anybody go searching around for who we are. So um, we typically start our frameworks with a workshop.
Okay.
And I like to just be transparent about how we run those workshops because I think a lot of people could actually go out and run their own. And I think they'd get a lot of value from it. So um, my recommendation is that when you start, you get all the people that you can who are involved in the creation of your content, your messaging, your email, your social, your website, and you sit down and start asking questions like, what are our objectives? And you should really only have two or three. One might be sell more widgets, and one might be save the planet. And then the next step that we do is we say, okay, let's come up with 10 KPIs that layer into each of those. So if our KPI, if our objective is save the planet, well, let's come up with some potential data points, just pie in the sky data points. And then the kind of secret sauce is I'm going to let, when we do these workshops, put people in separate groups and they'll be talking to each other and then they'll all come back together and I'll say, all right, now take that list of 10 and make it three and rank them in order. We're not going to have more than three and extra credit if you can get it down to two. And a long way of saying the biggest thing that I advocate against is more data. And if you're talking to folks who are your potential vendors or your partners, your agencies, and they're pushing more data, it's unlikely that that's going to result in action and insight. And so um, I really encourage folks to resist the tendency to just include that extra data point because it doesn't hurt anything, because it can actually hurt something. So a good example of that might be if we chose to only determine success was how many people signed up for Kevin's subscription newsletter, right? That was our goal. It was our number one goal. We thought that KPI was going to fall direct into the category of influence. One of Kevin's categories was influence, and the number one KPI was how many people we could get to sign up for his newsletter. That's a pretty straightforward thing. Did we do more of that? Did we do less of that? But if we start layering on other metrics on that, how many website visitors were there? How many impressions did your social media post get? How many people did we get in front of? I can pretty much always find one to tell you you're doing a great job. You're doing amazing. Look at this data point says you're amazing. But if that data point isn't new subscribers went up, then why does it matter? It's not helpful. And in a lot of ways, it's going to actually convince you. You'll use it to convince yourself you're doing better than you are. So when I advocate, when we do these workshops for fewer data points, it's not because it's about the resources needed to measure it or the number of dashboards or API calls or whatever. It's mostly just because you got to resist the tendency to look for the best metric and then use that to rationalize the work that you're doing. And the fewer KPIs you have, the fewer metrics that you're looking at, the harder it is to make something look good when it's not good, or bad when it's good after all. So I really recommend that folks start by thinking about streamlining the things and the data points and the metrics that they're looking at into as few as possible. Strip it back as far as you possibly can. Just do that for a year. And my gut will be you'll have better action, more insights that drive action, more compelling learnings than if you just add more KPIs and more data points. So that's a big part of what we look at in our workshops. And I spend 2 days trying to convince you why website visitors don't matter, or nobody should care about their Facebook impressions, or whatever the thing might be. And that's all part of our framework. So our website for that is graspyorimpact.com. There's some resources there you can check out, some questions that we like to ask in our workshops or in surveys that we send out that you could use on your own as well. Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn at Callanan, Neil. And I'd love to hear from anybody who's in this space looking to try to do a better job understanding what's going on.
Awesome. Awesome. Um, Neil, is there any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Hmm. You know what? I guess I would say to the brands who are questioning whether or not they can speak out when something is heavy on their hearts or their conscious, um, I think you probably should. And I think there's probably some data somewhere that will tell you your customers like it when you do as well. And in the current state of all things being polarized politically and otherwise in our country, I think there's been a little bit of a pullback on how comfortable people feel using their brands as a messaging tool. And I actually think I, people say, "Oh, we're not looking for our brands to help us decide what we should care about." I think we are. I think we want to put our money towards companies who are aligned with what we want to be aligned with. And that as a customer, I really like when somebody makes it easy to feel good about going to buy that ice cream or that fleece or that thing. Make me feel excited and like my contribution with my dollars is going towards something good. As a consumer, I'm here for it, and I think a lot more of us are always the vocal minority who says stick to whatever, focus on your product. We're not here to hear you talk about your values. I think a lot of us actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. 100% agree with that. Well, Neil, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today and just share from your heart. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thanks so much, man.
Yeah, appreciate you, Kevin. This has been great.